What if I was to propose that the LGBTQIA plus community and the 7 Manly rugby league players who aren't going to play this weekend may have a little bit more in common than is perhaps being talked about on the media and on all the social platforms at the moment? A little bit controversial, but hear me out. I got asked what I thought about this the other day, and I'm of Pacific Island descent myself. I grew up in and around the church. And while I'm not religious at all now, it's not something that is a part of my life. I understand how that all works and how the mechanics of it and what it looks like for a lot of Pacific Islanders. And as a huge fan and supporter and lover of the LGBTQIA plus community, and like an absolute conviction that everyone should have the chance to feel connected and have opportunities and not be discriminated against. The way that this conversation has kind of played out in public, I think, just lacks the nuance required to actually bridge gaps, to extend the olive branches across divides. And when we allow conversations to play out like that, we deepen divides and we make things more difficult to change in the future. And ideally, in my mind, what I think you'd like to see is more change that brings us all closer together and helps people feel more in place and supported, no matter where they sort of come from or what the deal is. One of the things that is a real through line in the lives of my friends and the people I've worked with from the LGBTQIA plus community are these stories of like coming out, and the fact we even sort of say coming out and we talk about it, and it's sometimes a little bit controversial that it's even a thing, but it is a thing and it's an unfortunate thing. The reason that it's a thing for a lot of people is because they're worried that if I come out to the people I love very much, that I respect, that I care about, who've had this amazing influence in my life and who are so important to me, if I come out, that I might not be treated the same afterwards, that they might think of me differently, treat me differently, all the way through to they might ostracize me and kick me out and never speak to me again, which is the unfortunate reality and it's a tragic reality for many people in that community. Particularly, it's culturally dependent. It depends on where you are in the world. It depends on your experiences growing up. And some people are very fortunate; they don't have that experience. They just grow up and they're loved, and they come out, and it's not a problem. And for other people, it's a really traumatic and horrible experience. And I despair for that circumstance. It's a horrible circumstance. But what we've seen in the last week is that Manly announced the jersey without consulting or speaking to the players or telling them first. And these 7 players are just young men. They got an average age of 22. They're Polynesian, Pacific Islander communities. They're 19, they're 21, they're 21. They're professional footballers. They're just paid to play football. That's what they have signed up for. It's what they love. It's what they do. They have grown up. Polynesians, we have large families, not just physically large, but large families. And the church in a lot of communities is a real focal point. It's a really important part of the community. It informs so much of their lives and the social lives. A lot of success is attributed to the church. It's attributed to their faith. What I've seen in the commentary is largely like, these guys aren't playing because of their Christian faith. And from my reading of it, there's some of the guys are Tongan, some are Samoan. Saab is Australian, of Indigenous Australian descent. And then I've seen, photos, people being really clever, showing a picture of the Pope with pride flags and saying, "Oh, do you think you know more about the Bible than this guy?" One of the challenges when just saying Christian is there's so many denominations of Christian, and the different denominations, they think different things, they have different civic responsibilities, they perform their religion in different ways, have different obligations, and think different things, like they have different beliefs. So in the Pacific Islands, there's quite a few, for instance, Church of Latter-day Saints, Mormons. I don't think they like to be called Mormons anymore. And so that's very different to Catholics. So when you show a picture of the Pope to someone from the Church of Latter-day Saints, they're like, "Yeah, mate, that's not us. Whatever. You might as well show me a picture of Harry Potter or Star Wars, it's the same thing. And so we lose that nuance, and when we lose the nuance, we lose the opportunity to have a good conversation to help people understand what's going on. Now, they've decided to not wear the jersey, and there is some level of personal sacrifice in that. They're not going to get match payments. Obviously, they're attracting a lot of negative attention. The reason that they're not doing that, we don't know their personal preferences because no one's had a chance to speak to them, because the pile-on was immediate and the club didn't speak to them beforehand, and they weren't given a chance to speak to their respective congregations, communities, community leaders, church leaders, ministers, whoever, and say, here's the deal. Am I able to perhaps get a dispensation for this? Or how do I talk about this? And instead it was put on them, and then for fear of that same sort of ostracizing action, they've said, we're going to sit this one out because of the consequences that would have as a person in this faith, in this community, whatever that might be. And I certainly don't assume that they're all in the same congregation, community, faith, church, whatever. And so if we were going to try and bridge that divide, we would have to meet people where they are in order to help them see the possibility and see the humanity in the people over here. And I think that's something that a lot of people who've had challenges with challenging their family members about, or members of their community about, would actually really deeply understand if we sort of took a second and went, oh yeah, actually, we've been pretty insensitive. We've put it on these kids who aren't in the business of social justice stands, that they're in the business of playing rugby. They've just elected to step back. It's not without precedent. There was a AFLW player last year, Haneen, who sat out game during Pride Round because of her faith. They're young. Now, I've never found in my trying to change people's mind career, and I've got a long one and a million losses and a million fails along the way. No matter how strongly you believe them to be wrong on the internet, I mean, it's easy for me to hop on and say, hey, this is gross. It's the wrong idea. It's not inclusive. I don't agree, and that's true. I don't agree. I don't agree with with that sort of stance. I don't agree with the premise behind it. But I also know that that's not how people change their minds and come to understand different perspectives. That they need to have conversations that meet them where they are, which means understanding the context in which they were raised, the basis for these beliefs, what they stand to lose or get in trouble for or feel disconnected from if they were made to do this thing, and what that means for them. Because at the end of the day, their families and their communities, and often the congregation and things like that, they're going to be there long after football's gone. They were there long before football came along. And so there's this 20 years of history there that's very difficult to just undo in one day and one moment. And there's been a lot of criticism during Pride Month, for instance, that, we don't want people doing token things, and we don't want people to just pretend, and we don't want corporations to wear colours for a week or a month and then ditch them at the end of the month if they don't really care. But we're really mad if these guys won't do it. And I sort of think, well, I wouldn't want to see them wear the jersey and then say, but I don't believe in it. I think it's a sin, whatever their position is. I'm not sure. I think that would be worse. I honestly think that would be worse. And I think that by doing this and stepping away, it's perhaps just it could have and may still be an opportunity to open a door for a good conversation, to try and get the chance to bring them together and bring the communities together and the broader communities at large that have these kinds of issues. And we should do better, because the LGBTQIA plus community deserves it, and so do everyone else who's got anything to do with anything, and the broader public conversation deserves a little bit of extra effort to bring people together. It's too easy to dig your heels in. It's too easy to have a go. And we probably just need to take a minute and take a breath to try and understand where people are coming from, so that we can actually bridge those gaps and bring people together by meeting them where they are and having those really great interactions.